hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience as you waited. We are anticipating that one of our speakers may be a little late. Marvin Defoe received 10 inches of snow where he's at. So he's sort of scrambling and zooming from home. So Marvin might be in a little bit late, but we're going to go ahead and get started with our talk as is. I'm going to do my lengthy introduction, and Dr. Heather Walder will start the talk, and hopefully we'll have Marvin hopping on later. So hello, everyone. Again, I'm Dr. Liz Watts-Maluhos. I'm the section head of collaborative research engagement at the Illinois State Archaeological Survey. I'll be the moderator for today's lecture. On behalf of organizer Dr. Erin Benson, welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are super excited to have a new take on our spring speaker series this year, focusing on collaborative research, and with a lecture today by Officer Marvin Defoe and Dr. Heather Walder. This series is being supported by funds from the Office of the State Archaeologist and ISAS's Collaborative Research Engagement section. ISAS is a division of the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. With over 70 full-time archaeologists and support staff working across the state, ISAS is one of the largest archaeological research institutions in the U.S. The Illinois State Archaeological Survey recognizes that its offices on the University of Illinois campus in Urbana-Champaign and its field stations elsewhere in the state of Illinois are on the lands of the Delaware, Ho-Chunk, Iowa, Kaw, Kickapoo, Miami, Menominee, Meskwaki, Odawa, Ojibwe, Omaha, Osage, Otoe, Missouri, Peoria, Ponca, Potawatomi, Quapaw, Sauk, Shawnee, Winnebago, and other Native nations. ISAS acknowledges the histories of forced removals of these nations from their homelands and dispossession from their cultural sites and material culture. ISAS is committed to building partnerships and collaborating with Native nations on the study, protection, and promotion of their cultural heritage. On behalf of the state archaeologist and director of ISAS, Dr. Timothy Pocketat, today we are honored to host Officer Defoe and Dr. Walder. Marvin Defoe is a tribal elder and the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. He has served in his role as TIPO for 8 years, having previously served as a council member and vice chairman of the Red Cliff Band. Officer Defoe is also a birch bark canoe builder and is passionate about the continuance of the Ojibwe language. Dr. Heather Walder is an assistant teaching professor at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse and research associate for the Field Museum. Together and with collaborator Dr. John Crosse at North Dakota State University, Officer Defoe and Dr. Walder have led the Geti Anishinaabe Ijechegewin, or Ancient Anishinaabe Lifeways community archaeology project since 2018. This project brings together tribal and other university students in a collaborative and community engaged setting at Frog Bay Tribal National Park, the first tribal national park in the United States. I will now turn it over to Officer Defoe if he was able to join us, or Dr. Walder, and want to remind you to please submit questions in the chat, and a question and answer discussion will follow the lecture as time allows. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Heather, I will let you share yours.
Great. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Let me just get started here. Is that working for everybody?
Yep, you are good to go on our end.
Okay, great. Well, we'll watch the chat for Marvin or the participants. I know he would very much like to be here and is planning to show up. But as we say on our project, we like to go with the flow. And so with Marvin Defoe imminent, I think we'll get started here. And I'm very excited to be able to share a little bit about our collaborative efforts today. The project is called Gete Anishinaabe Jichigewin Community Archaeology Project, or GICAP for short. That is a mouthful. And we are working in a place called Meskwabakong, Red Cliff, Wisconsin. This work is directed by the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. And as collaborators, we work to support their collaborative and community engaged research efforts. So Let me see if I can get my slides to advance. There are so many people to say thank you to and say chi miigwech to who've made this project possible, including 5 seasons of field school students, North Dakota State University, and of course my colleague John Crosse there, the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse, but mainly we really do want to thank the Red Cliff Band of Lake Superior Chippewas, tribal council, community volunteers, paraprofessionals, and all of the tribal members who've invited us to work on their ancestral territory and their territory today. This work is supported by grant funding from the National Park Service in the form of a tribal heritage grant, and has also received funds from the Wisconsin Humanities Council. So Ms.
I'm going
Guaguacon,
to interrupt you. So sorry for 1 second.
yes.
I think Marvin was logged on. For some reason, it
Oh,
was showing up as your
great.
name. So I just made him a co-host. So Marvin, you'll be
Wonderful.
able to unmute and show. Ah, there. Perfect. Hi,
Great.
Marvin. Welcome.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Craig, I've been put on mute for a while here. I've been trying to get on and I don't know what happened. I think it
You
come
were
on.
on there for a long time too, because we thought, oh, Heather must be logged on to on 2 different devices, never thinking that it was you. So I'm so sorry that we didn't
Yeah,
put two and two
it come
together.
up for myself as Heather. So you're gonna have 2 Heathers here, I guess.
That's great. I've been trying to clone myself for years.
Well, it's
Phenomenal.
great to see you. Thank you. And I will mute and be quiet again.
Okay, well, Marvin, no one better to introduce Ms. Guabacong than yourself. So I was just gonna kind of talk a little bit about this beautiful place that we work.
Yeah, you can see that on the map. I believe everybody can see that. We're right on the shoreline by Lake Superior. You can see all the islands, Possum Islands there, and of course, what we're gonna be talking about, Frog Bay Tribal National Park. And we would say Mesquite, a big Kong, a place that is a place that is red. And what that means is you go out on the water in the sun during the sunrise or the sunset. You'll look on the shoreline and you're going to see nothing but red rocks, red cliffs. It's a very beautiful place. In fact, um, I live about a quarter of a mile from the Lake Superior. So that's Musquabbie. We're one of 11 reservations in the state of Wisconsin. If you looked at the big map, we're one of 163 Ojibwe reserves or communities sur surrounding the Great Lakes.
One of the really neat things about being able to work in Mesquabakong is that our project is just one small part of many other community engaged kind of collaborative and citizen science efforts. So I wanted to draw attention to this one at Minneson.org, which has been led by folks from Red Cliff and Bad River, who are another Ojibwe community in the area, looking at the environmental plant and animal resources across the Apostle Islands. So it's a website that brings together Ojibwe ecological knowledge and language and history, as well as a little bit of archaeology. But I wanted to acknowledge that as archaeologists, one of our goals is kind of decentering the research questions that might come from an academic setting. And really trying to focus on the interests of people in the region. So to do that, one of the things I like to put up on the screen is thinking about how archaeology as a discipline has been framed as far as who's in power, who's in control of the projects. This is a slide drawing on Chip Colwell's 2016 article on collaborative research, wherein for much of our history as archaeologists, this work has been under colonial control with little or no voice for descendant communities, and sometimes even done with active opposition from those descendants. So what we're trying to do is just shift the power and control on this spectrum towards full collaboration or even complete Indigenous control, where support is authorized by the tribe, say by getting approval from tribal council before moving forward on a project. and acting as consultants. So myself and Dr. John Crosse are contractors. When we show up in Red Cliff, we get handed a little plastic card that says contractor, and we work literally for the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. So this project is run through Red Cliff and is actually not affiliated currently with my university at all. So it's about making sure that control and power are vested in the descendant community, however possible. And it's an amazing project. We have been working on developing this project together since 2018, and we've run 5 field seasons in those past 6 years. So I've got our very first youth day camp from 2018 photo here, and it's great to see. We'll see a few of those kids around, and they're teenagers. You got Harley in the middle there, Tippo Defoe down in front. This has been an amazing project that is growing and getting some real legs under it. Gete, again, just meaning ancient, Anishinaabe, indigenous people, Ijitchigewin, culture, kind of way of doing things. What else do you want to say about GuyCap, Marvin?
Okay, yeah, what I like to talk about Gite Anishinaabe, Gite means like way long time ago. There's kind of the ancient people that lived on the land. That's what Gite means. So Zichigewin is kind of the way of life. How did them old time, long time ago, and this, how did they live? And part of that certainly, as you can see in the picture, is doing some excavation there. But the other part is incorporating our community, elders, knowledge keepers, if you will, into the project. And we're going to share some of the things that we did, culturally, certainly with the project. But I do want to say that Frog Bay and this whole area certainly is an old time place where we found evidence of inhabitant 5,300 and some years ago, carbon dating. But our through Anishinaabe Zichigewin, our legends and our stories can date back. Our stories go back 13, 15,000 years ago, and I'm still trying to find this giant beaver that swam in the lake, and I'm not having any luck. A giant beaver. We got stories, stories about that. So some of the work that we do during this time is engaging in bridging those stories with science.
And one of the ways that we do this is by bringing together students on the project, including field school students, who are able to take on some of that more technical science and then think about how those methods can be used in support of the community's questions, like what would it have been like to live on the shore of what was then glacial Lake Duluth at the end of the last ice age? What would it be like to encounter a giant beaver and other Pleistocene megafauna that we know existed? And so this format of combining academic training in the form of an undergraduate field school, where they learn all the usual things to do, how to dig a square hole, how to lay out a shovel test transect. But they also do things in service to the community. So here are some students building a lodge frame for the powwow this last summer, wherein students and community members work together using things like power tools and ladders, but also using ironwood that had been harvested just that week. What else? So do you want to say any more about the service learning, the Ojibwe Mwingabeshuin work?
Did you mention me, Heather? I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, it's okay. Anything else you want to go on, like the, having the students build the lodge or clean up after the
Yeah.
powwow? Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to apologize. I'm having a hard time hearing here. And in fact, I was at home. The tribe shut down. Everything shut down because we had a snowstorm today. So I couldn't get it going at home because my internet went out. So I said, well, I got to go down to my office, which is 8 miles away, and here I am. And I'm still trying to get my sound going, but but in any case, we service learning. You know, again, we try to incorporate uh, who we are as indigenous people with the participants in our field school, the participants in our work that that we do, and one of the things we here in our community is we had to overcome the stereotypes of archaeology because certainly history hasn't been too kind to our people as far as excavating graves and excavating uh, different sacred sites without our knowledge of it. So that's one of the things we did with the education component of our project, and certainly, I didn't mention I'm a TIPO, Tribal Historical Preservation officer, and that's the work I do in our community is do survey work to and train tribal monitors, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it's very important to bridge a communication between what archaeology is and then also the indigenous community. And I think throughout the 5 years, the work that we did, I believe we've accomplished that. I believe that we did accomplish that, and that's why we had. You could see they're building a wigwam there. Well, that wigwam actually was for a moccasin game. We got moccasin game tournament. Even that moccasin game, I ain't got enough time to explain it, but a traditional game is for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that's what they helped us build in that wigwam.
And that's like a really incredible experience for the students as well, because they're learning not just the archaeology, but the modern living culture of the Red Cliff community and Ojibwe culture today. So that's one of my favorite parts is actually taking a break from the archaeology and spending time over powwow weekend, just hanging out and talking to people. This is part of what has been described academically as a heart-centered practice, wherein relationship building and real care, taking care and taking time to make meaningful connections within the community where you work, can actually lead to more robust ways to gain insight about the past by considering non-Western knowledge frameworks, such as a concept of perhaps cyclical time rather than linear time. And again, taking time to understand the past harm that archaeology has caused in a particular community, and then listening to the perspectives of people, all fall under this kind of framework of heart-centered archaeology. If you're not familiar with this amazing edited volume that came out in 2020, it's really worth a read. Each of the case studies focuses on Indigenous and collaborative or fully Indigenous-led archaeologies around North America. This idea draws on Adelaide's really famous idea of braided knowledge. Sonia Adelaide, as an Anishinaabe or an Indigenous woman, talks about braiding Western science with things like storytelling and oral history and cultural knowledge in order to better interpret the past. The idea that each one of these things can contribute something unique to our understanding, and acknowledging these relationships that we take this time and care of building as a way of learning and a way of even generating new research questions. So we framed our project on that model and applied for a tribal heritage grant from the National Park Service. This is funding that's available directly to TIPO offices for various archaeological projects. And we are just wrapping up our tribal historic preservation grant now. We had a bit of a COVID extension, but much of the research that I'm going to talk about was funded through this work. And receiving this grant was a big deal in Red Cliff. As far as I know, the TIPO office there had never received one specifically of this kind, and it's really done an amazing job of kind of supporting the the project supporting GICAP for the last 3 years. So this project requires that we address priorities identified by the U.S. Secretary of the Interior. And one of these priorities is ensuring sovereignty means something, that the grants themselves are designed to ensure sovereignty over research undertaken in these locations. Marvin, you want to talk about sovereignty a bit?
Yeah, well, that's how the park was started, Frog Bay Tribal National Park, sovereignty, and we kind of locally, our tribe. I always say, how long did people ask me how long did it take you to create the Frog Bay Tribal National Park? And I said, I don't know, about 15 seconds. And so, well, what do you mean? Well, because we have sovereignty and we have those rights to kind of give direction to our own tribe and to our own community. And really, that's only how long it took. And with the national park, with the national park, that is the authority that me as a TIPO, in 1998, they amended the National Historical Preservation Act, and previously to that, all that authority to do surveys and et cetera, went to the state Chippos, the state Chippos. So since then, 1998, Tippos transfer have an MOU agreement with the National Park Service and the authority from the state Chippewa office to the tribal Chippewa grants that authority. And today, today there's over 200 and I guess 220 tribes that do have tribal Chippewa departments. So that's kind of one way of explaining sovereignty, what it means, and that it gives that authority to the tribes, and that's kind of what it does. It's you act on it,
I would say it's one of our primary considerations in just framing out the project and even thinking about what comes next. It's ensuring that the needs of the community are the highest priority. So one way that we've worked towards this is by doing tribal monitor training. This is something we've been working on for the past 3 years, wherein community members from Bad River, Red Cliff, and around the state have the opportunity to work side by side with the field school students and with us as academic archaeologists to learn what a site looks like, how to recognize an artifact or a feature. And it's a whole lot of work and it's a whole lot of fun. By the end of the week, the students and the community members learning together. We even did this in just a really cold, rainy, wet rainstorm one day. We had youth out from Bayfield Public School. It's been wonderful watching the Tribal Monitor program really take off to the point where monitors will be hired this summer to monitor a fiber optic cable project. And that's a pretty exciting part of what we've been doing. And it's part of the idea of building sovereignty and capacity in the community so that eventually outside archaeologists may not be needed at all to deal with the important work of managing these cultural and archaeological resources. So let's get into a few more examples of what we've learned here. This work has been going on for a long time, so there's obviously way too much research to summarize. But what I wanted to do is really focus on what we can learn together by doing this work. So here's just another map showing the location of the Frog Bay Tribal National Park. But this really helps you get a sense of what the area looks like and this beautiful resource-rich wetland near Frog Creek and the boundaries of the very large multi-component archaeological site known as the Frog Bay site within the Tribal National Park, which is again the tribe's or the nation's park managed by and for the Red Cliff community, but it is open to the public, so go check it out if you're ever up there. It's an incredible site as far as the science and the archaeology is concerned. There are intact old copper culture artifacts in situ within undisturbed feature contexts. a robust local quartz cobble lithic industry focused on bipolar reduction of small cores, and other information that we can gain from a lot of cultural features that are superimposed on this site. There's also a historic era, late 19th and early 20th century cabin shown on the yellow points. Those are each shovel tests. And we can see that the 19th and 20th century Euro-American structure and associated trash scatter really didn't do too much disturbance to the main area of the pre-contact site. So the positive shovel tests for pre-contact artifacts like the lithic debitage are shown in blue. And the pink border, kind of shown here, outlines the National Register boundary for the Frog Bay site that has been proposed. And I'm just going to ask because I'm curious, have you heard anything from our new tribal chairperson about the NRHP nomination? That's a question for Marvin.
Well, that's in the process right now, and that's one of the next steps that we're gonna present. Probably what you're seeing here, certainly to our tribal council, so that they have a full understanding of what we did, what we researched, and why we would put that on the national register, et cetera, et cetera. So I do anticipate within the next month.
That's fantastic. This has been a process that is not quick. In the CRM world, we get very used to things happening rapidly, write the nomination, send it in, move on to the next thing. But this is much more of a dialogue, and it's important to address any concerns. As recently as the 1970s, the national parks had been trying to annex parts of the Red Cliff Reservation and make them part of the Apostle Islands National Lakeshore. This is in living memory. So it's understandable that there could be concern about collaborating on a nomination for the National Register. So this is a very slow process that we're working through together with the hope of better protecting this amazing site. What you're looking at here is a heat map of shovel tests and artifact density from kind of the main area, as well as one of our excavation units. Unit 1, shown here with the scale on it, was backfilled, and then we excavated the rest of a 2x1 around it that was then expanded into a 2x3 excavation block. And I'm briefly just going to talk a little bit about what we found as far as real research outcomes. We identified a pit feature that started out as two, but then kind of merged in an amorphous way. This could possibly be a roasting pit for stone boiling or other traditional ecological knowledge practices that then became filled with trash and debris. But it's a really interesting feature that spanned about 2 meters north-south along one of the unit walls. And so it would have run north and south between units 1 and 4, leading us to eventually expand 2 units to the east. And Block A is, again, a highly stratified multi-component occupation area. We have a couple of post molds as well as many other features as well. And the artifacts you can see here, including one potentially temporarily diagnostic contracting stemmed Wabisa point made out of quartz, a quartz drill tip, and then several copper objects as well. So the presence of these material culture indicators of the long-term presence of Indigenous people at this one location has been a fascinating research project, and we've thrown a lot of science at it with multiple funding sources. One of the things I wanted to highlight about the collaborative work is that we were able to obtain additional radiocarbon dates by having many sources of funding. The TIPO office itself, as well as undergraduate research grants from UW-La Crosse. And last year, one of our oldest features, in fact, the oldest feature, feature 29 at the very bottom of Block A, was dated to more than 5,300 years ago, with our 2 oldest dates being supported with funds from a UWL student research grant. So this work is collaborative and stronger together because of the more opportunities for more funding to learn about the site. the late Archaic component, which is the period to which feature 2/8 is dated, comes in right around 3,000 years ago, and then several later woodland dates as well. What's difficult about the Frog Bay site is that temporally diagnostic artifacts are rare. It's an aceramic woodland component. So the only way to really date one of these features is to do absolute dating. So those costs can be defrayed by collaborating together. In my course this spring, the students are doing experimental archaeology to replicate some of the quartz lithics of the kinds that have been found at the site. So we are just getting started right now on our flint knapping project to perhaps get some useware on experimental tools to create a reference library to better understand the lithics that are produced at the Frog Bay site, again, with bipolar reduction of just local lake cobbles. So we'll be using some expedient tools and hopefully getting close to the kind seen here. The only other diagnostic tool type is this little tiny Madison arrowhead, but it was found in a disturbed pathway context and looks like it's maybe even water rounded and spent some time in the lake. So together, we're really working from as many different angles as we can, including a faunal analysis that was conducted, that's currently being conducted at the Mississippi Valley Archaeology Center. The preservation is quite poor for bone because of the sandy acidic soil, but the water resources and the plants and animals that would have been present within the Frog Creek and Frog Bay environment do show that it was a pretty resource-rich place to live 3,000 and 5,000 years ago. And this porcupine bone came from that very earliest dated feature. I'm going to go pretty quick through the scientific findings, but if there are questions, I can definitely come back to these in the Q&A section. But what I wanted to do was offer the opportunity for Marvin to talk about the plant resources that we see on the landscape in the past and their importance today. So it's Zinzi buckweed season, right? Aninitig is an important plant. So do you want to talk about the plants a bit?
Yeah, time to sugar bushing, so we're doing that right now. But I think this is what I'm really kind of interested in myself personally, with with Chippewa, because part of that is right now we're in climate change, and things are changing. The earth is going to change, and of course, that the earth changed 15,000 years ago. And, right here in Red Cliff, I'd be sitting right on a glacier. So, uh, did any of these plants or trees or that we're discovering now existed, I don't know, 10,000 years ago? But the pollen, certainly the pollen samples, will give us some indication, kind of what was on the landscape um, presently 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago, and that is some of the evidence and the evidence that we found, and pretty much what we found there is certainly still there today. Is still there today. So that's very interesting. But I'm thinking, I'm trying to get our natural resource department today in 2024 to do a very clear assessment of what there is on the landscape, because I often think of that. That's the work I do, is protecting sacred sites, historical sites, and it gets difficult at times if you don't know what's there. It's hard to protect it. So when we first started this whole problem, we didn't know what was out at Frog Bay 6 years ago, 7 years ago, and I know I didn't. I didn't know that. So I think I often wish, man, I wish they did some documentation 1,000 years ago, that kind of tell us a little bit, kind of what happened at that time, but of course you know as well as I do, they never did. But those are some capabilities. I think we could do that today. So I'd like to see a very clear assessment and things that I've learned. You know, I'm not a archaeologist or you know, I didn't go to school for that or whatever. My schooling was more in the traditional sense, learning our language, our stories, our Autosokan is what we call them, our traditional knowledge. You know, to that, and I really found it interesting when we started this project that we're trying to blend that and what is that word I came up with, Heather?
Oh, Anishinology, right?
Right.
Anishinology.
Yeah, initianology. So I kind of call it initianology too, where we're bridging science and humanity, and we try to bring that together. So um, that's my comment on this.
And
English.
that's Miigwech. The idea to do the pollen analysis came directly from this conversation of, is there some record that could go back 1,000 years that could tell us about the environment? The Earth itself keeps that record. So we were able to excavate a small trench down through the profile of a completed unit right next to one of our OSL sample holes, kind of at the end of a season. And we did this in small sediment layers that corresponded with the cultural features. And this is feature 2.8 shown here in the gray box. We can see that the feature has different plants represented. So there's a change in the dominant vegetation between the late Archaic and the woodland period, transitioning from more pine forest in the Archaic to more birch that you can still see today. People go and collect wigwas, birch bark, even now within the tribal national park. You can see the places on the trees where people have been collecting the bark for uses culturally today. So it's neat to see that it didn't always look like that, that it was much more of a pine forest earlier on with birch represented. We can see that the feature itself is full of charcoal, which is not surprising, lots of cultural activity. And that at the very base of the feature, there's ragweed pollen, which has been used as an indicator of ground disturbance and clearing activity. Proportionally more ragweed than even during the Euro-American land clearing activities. So it's kind of interesting to think about what people might have been doing leading to that much disturbance at that time. And this is just indicating that statistically the feature is different as far as pollen goes than the preceding and subsequent levels. Down here at the bottom is that earlier feature 29 level, down at and below 50 centimeters. There's more to say about the pollen, but certainly seasonality is a big question. I've snowshoed out to the Frog Bay Tribal National Park in January, and it's been 40 below, and it's not a great place to spend too much time. So one of our interpretations is that this is a seasonal, warm season occupation area, place to go fishing, to go gathering, to collect medicines. But all of this information can be then supported, or rather is in support of knowledge that is ecological knowledge, that it's not that the archaeology supports Indigenous knowledge, it's that the Indigenous knowledge is prioritized however possible, and archaeology may contribute to better, more robust understandings. So just to sum up the Frog Bay site, it shows Gete and Anishinaabe and Indigenous people have been at this location for more than 5,300 years, and certainly the beach itself formed shortly before that time. So if we wanted to look for older occupations, we might need to go out to higher elevations. And this is work that could be done in the future, looking for Paleo-Indian sites that may be present even within the boundaries of the reservation. We've learned more about the old copper component, as well as a little bit about the woodland occupation, although that's only documented from a single 1x1. but it shows the continuous reuse of this site during the warm season. And I believe we're getting kind of close to time here. So Marvin, what else do you want to say about the Frog Bay site?
Well, you can keep going to the other site.
Yeah, okay. I'll go very quickly
Go
through
very quickly.
yeah, you've already said this and I'll reiterate it again. This is a goal of the project. You can't protect these sites if we don't know they're there. So in 2019, a new parcel of land was repurchased into tribal ownership out of private ownership. And this land had been surveyed in the 1970s, so site numbers were assigned at what's called the Old Pageant Grounds parcel, where we've been doing survey for the last 3 years. Archival research supported by Ameren Mello and others, local knowledge holders who have a good understanding of the history of these 19th and 18th century historic events in Red Cliff, helped us identify maps that showed that the Red Cliff Indian Agency or the LaPointe Agency may have had some structures in this Lot 3 area. And so we went to go and see what we could see there. Right after the land was repurchased by Red Cliff, we went out there in November of 2019. So Marvin's kind of pointing across the bay at where there used to be an old bridge. And with us, we have Anastasia Wolhovd. At that time, she was a recent undergraduate, who'd just gotten a degree in anthropology. And she is also a Red Cliff enrolled tribal member. And Anastasia is here with Harley Defoe, Marvin's son. So in this early outreach event, we took a hike. We walked 3 miles out to this site. And fast forward to 2023, this last summer, Anastasia decided to go back and do a survey of this area where her great-great-grandparents once worked. Through this project, she learned that she had some family history connected to the Old Pageant Grounds parcel. And I am currently sitting on her master's thesis committee at New Mexico State University, Las Cruces, and she collected her data this summer, possibly mapping a site where literally her great-grandparents had been employed in the early tourism industry in the 1930s. And that is just incredible to see this project taking on a life of its own like this, where a community outreach event sparks someone to get an idea and then they pursue it through a graduate research project. So we're super proud of Anastasia and hope that she's wrapping up her thesis work soon. So very briefly, we did a phase 2 investigation of the pageant ground site this summer. We identified material culture that's very similar to the materials at Frog Bay, like this quartz drill, as well as historic era material culture, possibly including a native-made ceramic pipe bowl, though it did come from a disturbed waterline context. But this is the slide I'm really excited to show, because what it shows is that in the 19th century, there was disturbance from tourism activities that I don't have time to get into. These are actually electrical cables dated to the 1920s that were coming out across a bridge and illuminating the site for this tourist pageant. But below that, in an undisturbed layer, we have yet another Gete Anishinaabe settlement, some of the oldest dates for this site, as well as quartz debitage in situ in the 18th and 19th century component. So showing that the stone tool making technology likely didn't disappear in the 19th century, showing continuity as well as change. So here's just another view of that really old feature, the Gete Anishinaabe Middle Archaic feature. And in it right here, we have these specks of red. This is very likely to be red ochre in this hearth feature, which has these dates, again, going back to the Middle Archaic. So these are pageant ground radiocarbon dates that we just obtained last fall with funding from the Tribal Historic Preservation Grant, the Tribal Heritage Grant. And this is a shot showing that red ochre staining the hands of one of our archaeologists, Bill Kurtz, who's a BIA archaeologist, who comes out and supervises and guides the project a little bit. And I'm going to turn it over to Marvin to kind of wrap up the significance and the importance of the project.
Well, I said again, we're just trying to learn who we are here also in our community in Red Cliff as Anishinaabe, and certainly some of the work that we've done. With that, it's part of the puzzle. It's part of the piece of the puzzle, understanding, you know, who we are and encompassing with our TEK, traditional ecological knowledge, or knowledge of our our history and ceremonies and who we are, etc. It's kind of nice to know your story, you know. And this whole project, the work we've done here, it just helps. It helps tell our story. One of the stories that I'm in, I do have to say though, I started off with a giant beaver, and I know Heather mentioned that, and even in our stories, at one time there was a big lake here, big body of water, and in that big body of water was giant beaver, and these beaver are 7 feet tall, 8 feet tall, 7 feet, and they're huge giant beaver, and that's even in our stories. But in the science, you ask the was there ever giant beaver here in this water, and they say yeah, there was. Well, at one time, Lake Superior, Michigan, you know, the Great Eight was one big body of water. And there is evidence here in Red Cliff of that shoreline, you know, that talks about that. We can see it. We got evidence of that. Excuse me. But that's the next area I'm learning about. But with that project, it was a wonderful project and a wonderful opportunity. I look at it as really going out and bridging between traditional people here in Red Cliff and bridging with archaeologists and working together on identifying, put together the puzzle.
Miigwech. Thank
We're
you,
running
everyone.
close here now. There might be questions, eh?
I think so, probably. Hopefully we left enough time. I think we did right on.
Yeah, that was perfect. We've got 8 minutes for questions and discussions. So everyone, if you haven't yet, please put your questions in the chat. And I will start out, this is from ISAS Director and State Archaeologist Tim Pocketat. He says, "Thank you, Marvin and Heather, for giving us such an excellent and important presentation. I'm wondering what the major preservation or site protection challenges are at Frog Bay Tribal National Park. For example, shoreline erosion getting worse with climate change."
Marvin, do you want to take it?
I think you're still muted, Marvin. And let me know if you need to repeat. I'm tuning in from my basement, so the connection may not be great.
Oh, I gotta take myself off mute. God darn it. Yeah, there is challenges with that. Even at the pageant ground, you know, there's an ancient site there too, and there is erosion coming from Lake Superior because of climate change. It's up high. It was really high, 2 feet above normal, and it caused some damage there. And even amongst the islands, there was some historical sites that were being damaged because of the erosion. Frog Bay, Frog Bay is kind of a little more back a little bit. I'm not, I don't see too much erosion out there. Heather, do you? I don't recall
No,
seeing too much out there, but there is other sites certainly closer that is experiencing that.
absolutely. Frog Bay is a really protected site. And so we really haven't done a large scale excavation there because for that very reason, it's been there 5,000 years. And I see another of the questions references non-invasive technologies. And certainly that's a great candidate for what more we could do there. We've been able to see on the LiDAR kind of those paleo shorelines and how they have changed over time. But right now, Frog Bay is really stable. So that's good news for the sites there.
Yeah, and even what I'm noticing even now today, I go around, look at the waterways, and the water is really low. Really, really low. I think Lake Superior could be really low. It might even get up to 2 feet. I mean, didn't hardly have any snow this year. You look at the river, usually the rivers are bustling with spring water runoff. This year they're not. They're not running off. So I think what's going to happen is that the lake is going to go back. You're probably going to see a lot of beach, a lot of more beach. So if that happens, I'm gonna be out at Frog Bay looking at that beach line. I'm gonna be out there looking. And I think that's an opportunity for us to really take a look and I'll probably be out to pageant grounds too, looking in the water if that water is gonna recede. So it has its benefits and advantages at the same time, I guess.
Heather, you mentioned seeing another question in the chat. I don't think Aaron and I have access to that.
Oh, okay.
So if you don't mind
Yeah, I
reading
can
and answering, that
absolutely.
would be great.
Oh, it's more of a direct message from Al T. Just asking in general about the use of non-invasive geophysics in Musquabbacong. And so I think I can answer that one really briefly. So it's a forested area, so things like magnetometry and resistivity have challenges of getting through really, really dense wooded areas where there's a lot of deadfalls. The students have challenges with that too. So we haven't been able to do anything like ground penetrating radar or anything like that because of the area that we're within. But the LiDAR is really incredible. It does allow us to see the glacial Lake Duluth shoreline and identify areas where survey may be more appropriate in the future. But again, it's very densely wooded lots, so a lot of the geophysics you might use are really challenging to make work in that environment, unfortunately. But I fully agree with the point of the question coming in that came into me that, you know, when possible, let's use the non-invasive methods. Yeah.
Great. I think I have time for one more question, which is partially answered on this slide by the Red Cliff TIPO priorities, identifying new sites and protecting known ones. Sort of outside or in addition to those priorities, how do you both envision this collaboration moving forward in the future?
Aho, Heather.
Oh boy. I'll start, I guess. Really, I think what we need to do as settler scholars is more listening. So this summer we are not running a field season. We're writing up what we have, and I hope to be there for a couple weeks to just hang out and talk to folks, spend time talking with Marvin and others in the Cultural Preservation Office and see what the questions are and how we as academic archaeologists might be of service to the community.
Right. And then part of, it kind of opens your eyes, your understanding when you do work like this, especially in job I have as TIPO, certainly in our community. I got 14,500 acres to look after, and there's 350 leased lands within our reservation. And one of the, and again, to know what's there, this gives us an opportunity to explore other areas of what's there. For an example, homesteads, old homesteads. And I think Heather, that's where that LiDAR might come in handy. So this kind of opened our eyes to other areas that we might want to we might want to look at, other than doing excavation work. I would like to look moving forward with some of that work, identifying some of these old homesteads around our community, because one of the jobs that I have too is protect grave sites. You know, I got to protect grave sites too. You know, that's with it. And for an example, Lac de Flambeau, another tribal community, we call it Watswaganing. And one of the practices that their community did is when somebody passed away, they would bury right by the homestead or right by where they lived. You know, there wasn't a big set; they would just bury, right where they lived. So there's a lot of old homestead places here in Red Cliff, and I'd like to have a project also to look at that more extensively.
Well, thank you so much, Officer Defoe and Dr. Walder. This has been an incredible talk. I'm going to switch screens to my screen, or share my screen really quick so I can do my official sign off. And say, on behalf of the Prairie Research Institute, ISAS, and the Office of the State Archaeologist, thank you again to Officer Defoe and Dr. Walder, and thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us this afternoon. This lecture was recorded and it'll be posted on the ISAS YouTube page with the rest of this is our fourth iteration of the Spring Speaker Series, so you can find almost all of those lectures on our YouTube page. And before we sign off, I just want to point you to our next and final event in this series, which is Tuesday, April 30th. It's a little bit of a shift from our typical Monday afternoons. Tuesday, April 30th at 6:30 p.m. Central, we'll be hosting Dr. Joseph Galloy from the Illinois Department of Transportation, Robert White III, the president of the Historical Society of Brooklyn, Illinois, and Miranda Yancey of the Illinois State Museum to speak about their collaborative work in Brooklyn, Illinois. So we hope to see you there, and have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us.